You know, life is tough. There are times when it feels like everything is falling apart. You face challenges that seem insurmountable, and in those moments, it's easy to feel alone. But I want to tell you something powerful. Trusting in God is the key to turning every setback into a setup for a comeback. When you're in the valley, when it seems like the weight of the world is on your shoulders, that's when you need to trust in God's plan the most. You see, God doesn't bring you this far to leave you hanging. His purpose is greater than the pain you're going through. And the moment you surrender, the moment you put your trust in Him, things start to shift. So no matter what you're facing today, no matter how difficult your journey, I want you to remember this: God is with you in every situation. He's there in the highs and the lows. And if you trust Him, truly trust Him, you'll see miracles unfold in your life that you never thought possible. This intro sets an inspiring, energizing tone, much like Les Brown's dynamic speaking style. Trusting God is a choice, not a feeling. In our daily lives, we are often guided by emotions, moods, and circumstances. Our feelings can be unpredictable, fluctuating from one moment to the next, influenced by our environment, relationships, or even our physical state. One moment we feel motivated, hopeful, and energized, while the next we might feel discouraged, anxious, or uncertain. This roller coaster of emotions can create a false sense of security in trusting ourselves or trusting what we can see and understand. Yet, when it comes to trusting God, we are called to make a deliberate decision to trust Him, regardless of our feelings or circumstances. Trust, in its purest form, is about choosing to believe in something greater than ourselves, especially when the path ahead is unclear. God, who is constant and unchanging, calls us to trust Him, not because we always feel like it, but because we have faith in His wisdom, power, and love. The choice to trust in God is one that transcends fleeting emotions. It's about believing that, no matter what we experience, God is in control and has a purpose for everything. This choice does not rely on our emotions, which can mislead us, but on the truth that God's ways are higher than ours, and His plans are perfect even when they don't align with what we want or expect. Our feelings can often tell us that trusting God is difficult, especially when we are facing trials, suffering, or uncertainty. In moments of hardship, the weight of the circumstances can cloud our ability to see beyond the immediate pain. We might ask ourselves, why is this happening, or where is God in all of this? In these moments, trusting God may feel like a distant idea, something we know we should do, but find it difficult to embrace because of our emotional state. But trust is not based on our understanding of the situation. It is based on the belief that God knows better than we do. Choosing to trust God in those difficult times is an act of faith, not one driven by emotions. In fact, trusting God when we don't feel like it is one of the most powerful expressions of faith. It demonstrates that our belief in God is not dependent on how we feel in the moment, but our recognition of His character and promises. When we choose to trust God in the midst of trials, we acknowledge that His wisdom far exceeds our limited perspective. We may not understand the reason for our struggles, but we choose to trust that God is working in the background, even when we cannot see it. This kind of trust requires surrender, the act of letting go of our own desires for control and allowing God to lead us through the unknown. It's important to remember that trusting God is not a one-time decision. It is an ongoing process. Every day we make the choice to trust Him anew. Some days the choice feels easy, and other days it feels incredibly difficult. The key is recognizing that trust is not about a perfect feeling or emotion. It is about consistently choosing to rely on God's truth over our fluctuating emotions. It's about believing that His promises are true, regardless of what we're feeling at any given moment. In Scripture, we are reminded time and again of the importance of trusting God. Proverbs 3:5-6 says, "Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways submit to Him, and He will make your path straight." This verse emphasizes that trust in God is not based on our limited understanding, but on His infinite wisdom. It challenges us to lean into Him, especially when we don't understand what's happening around us. Trusting God requires humility, the willingness to accept that we don't have all the answers and that His plan is greater than our own. But trusting God is also a choice that leads to peace. The Apostle Paul in Philippians 4:6-7 encourages believers to present their anxieties to God in prayer, assuring them that God's peace will guard their hearts and minds. This peace does not come from the absence of challenges, but from the presence of God in the midst of those challenges. When we choose to trust God, we experience a peace that transcends our understanding. It is a peace that guards us against fear, doubt, and worry, because we know that God is with us and that He is working things out for our good. When we choose to trust God, we also choose to believe that He is faithful to His promises. God has promised to never leave us nor forsake us, and He is true to His word. Trusting God means believing that He will provide for us, protect us, and guide us according to His will. It means that we place our faith in His goodness, knowing that He desires the best for us, even if that means facing challenges or difficulties along the way. Trusting God doesn't mean that life will always be easy or that everything will go according to our plans. It means that no matter what happens, we believe God is sovereign and He has a purpose in everything. But trusting God also means surrendering our desire for control. We live in a world that often tells us that we must be in control to be successful or secure, yet trusting God requires us to let go of our need to control every aspect of our lives. It's an acknowledgement that ultimately we are not in control, but God is. This surrender is not always easy. We often want to hold on to our own plans, desires, and timelines. But when we choose to trust God, we are choosing to let go and allow Him to lead us, even when it means stepping into the unknown or the uncomfortable. One of the most beautiful aspects of trusting God is that it deepens our relationship with Him. The more we choose to trust God, the more we come to know Him and experience His faithfulness in our lives. Trust grows through experience. The more we see God's hand at work, even in the midst of difficulty, the more we learn to rely on Him. Each trial we face becomes an opportunity to strengthen our trust and deepen our faith in God. As we trust Him through the highs and lows, we begin to recognize His presence in every aspect of our lives. But trusting God is not about having all the answers or feeling secure in our own abilities. It is about choosing to place our faith in the one who is always faithful no matter the circumstances. It is a decision we make every day to trust in His goodness, His wisdom, and His love. And when we choose to trust God, we step into a peace and assurance that transcends anything the world can offer. God's plan is greater than our understanding. This simple truth carries with it profound depth, and yet it is something that can be so difficult to grasp fully. We live in a world that thrives on logic, analysis, and understanding. We are taught to figure things out, to make sense of the chaos, and to create plans for every aspect of our lives. But God's plan is not bound by our finite minds, and often it is beyond what we can comprehend. One of the most challenging aspects of life is when we are faced with situations that seem to make no sense. We are often confronted with pain, loss, and challenges that appear unjust or unfair. In these moments, our natural tendency is to try to make sense of it all. We want answers, and we want to know why things happen the way they do. But the truth is that God's plan transcends our understanding. His wisdom is infinite, while ours is limited. Where we see confusion and frustration, God sees purpose and opportunity. The Bible tells us in Isaiah 55:8-9, "For my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are your ways my ways, declares the Lord. As the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts." This scripture reminds us that God's perspective is vastly different from our own. He sees the bigger picture, while we only see a small part of the story. Our lives are part of a much larger divine narrative, and often the things we experience are not about us alone, but about the greater good and the fulfillment of God's eternal purposes. But one of the key aspects of understanding that God's plan is greater than our own is learning to trust Him in the unknown. There will be times in life when we cannot see the way forward, when we feel lost, or when our efforts to control or manipulate situations seem to fall short. In those moments, we are invited to trust that God is working behind the scenes, orchestrating things in ways that we may not be able to see or understand. Trusting in God's plan requires surrender. It requires letting go of our need to understand every detail and accepting that His plan is greater and wiser than anything we could come up with on our own. It's important to recognize that God's plan is not just about us individually. It is not simply a roadmap for our personal comfort and success. God's plan is about His kingdom, His glory, and His purposes being fulfilled on the earth. We are just one part of a much larger picture. The things that happen to us and around us are often connected to a bigger purpose that we may not see immediately. But when we face trials, when we encounter obstacles, or when we feel like our lives are being upended, it can be easy to question God's plan. But those very challenges might be part of the greater story. He is writing a story that will ultimately bring glory to His name and good to His people. The beauty of knowing that God's plan is greater than our understanding is that we don't have to have it all figured out. It takes the pressure off of us. We are not in charge of every detail, and we don't have to be. We can rest in the assurance that God is in control and that He is guiding us even when the road ahead seems uncertain. It's like traveling on a path in the dark. We might only be able to see the next few steps, but we trust that the path is leading somewhere and that God is the one guiding us along the way. One of the most comforting aspects of God's plan is that it is good. Even when we can't see how something good could come from a difficult or painful situation, we can trust that God, in His perfect wisdom, is using it for our good. Romans 8:28 tells us, and we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love Him, who have been called according to His purpose. This verse doesn't promise that everything will be easy or that we will understand everything, but it does assure us that God is working in every circumstance, even the painful ones, for our ultimate good. What we may see as setbacks or struggles, God sees as opportunities for growth, transformation, and preparation for what He has planned for us. When we look at the lives of people in the Bible, we see numerous examples of God's plan unfolding in ways that didn't make sense at first, but ultimately led to His greater purpose. Take Joseph, for example. Joseph's life was filled with betrayal, false accusations, and imprisonment. From a human perspective, his life seemed to be a series of unfortunate events. But in hindsight, we see that God was using every setback to prepare Joseph for a position of leadership where he would ultimately save countless lives, including the lives of his own family. God's plan for Joseph was much greater than Joseph could have ever understood at the time, but through his faith and trust in God, he was able to play a pivotal role in God's bigger story. Similarly, Jesus' journey to the cross was incomprehensible to His disciples at the time. The crucifixion of the Son of God seemed like the ultimate tragedy, the most unjust event in history. Yet what looked like a defeat was actually the ultimate victory, as Jesus' death and resurrection made salvation available to all. What seemed like the end of God's plan was, in fact, the fulfillment of it. God's plan was so much bigger than anyone realized, and through it, He accomplished what no one else could have imagined. This is the nature of God's plan. It is often beyond our understanding in the moment, but it is always unfolding with purpose and intention. When we are in the midst of our own struggles, we may not be able to see the bigger picture. We may not understand why things are happening the way they are. But if we trust in God's plan, we can rest in the assurance that He is working all things together for good, even when it doesn't feel like it in the present moment. God's plan is not static, it is dynamic and ever-evolving, and He is constantly guiding us toward the fulfillment of His will. In moments when we feel lost or uncertain, we can trust that God's plan is still in motion. Even when we can't see the full picture, we can hold on to the truth that He is the master architect of our lives, and His plan is always moving us closer to His ultimate purpose for us. It is essential to understand that God's plan is not about our own comfort or immediate happiness. It's about our growth, our transformation, and the greater good of His kingdom. Trusting in God's plan means surrendering our own desires and allowing Him to shape us into who He wants us to be. It means submitting to His wisdom even when it doesn't make sense to us. And in doing so, we become part of something much larger than ourselves, God's divine and perfect plan that is far greater than anything we could have ever imagined. The trusting God brings peace in uncertainty. Life is filled with unknowns. No matter how much we try to plan, prepare, or anticipate what lies ahead, uncertainty remains a constant companion. The future, with its twists and turns, often seems like a foggy road, and the fear of what might come can overwhelm us. It is in these moments of uncertainty that we are given a powerful invitation to trust God. When we place our trust in Him, something profound happens. We find a peace that transcends our circumstances. This peace is not based on what we can see or understand. It is rooted in the assurance that God is in control and His plans for us are good, even when everything around us feels chaotic. Uncertainty can stir up anxiety, fear, and doubt. The mind can race with questions about what will happen next, whether we'll be okay or if we will ever find stability. These feelings are natural, but they are not meant to be the final word in our lives. But when we trust God, we acknowledge that there is a higher power at work in our lives, and this knowledge brings peace. It does not erase the challenges we face or make the future clear, but it shifts our perspective. Instead of focusing on the unknowns, we focus on the one who holds the future in His hands. The peace that comes from trusting God is not the same as a peace that comes from having all the answers. It's not the kind of peace that comes from knowing what will happen next or having everything neatly figured out. Rather, it is a peace that comes from the surrender of our need to control everything and the willingness to trust that God is working in ways we cannot yet see. In Philippians 4:6-7, Paul writes, "Do not be anxious about anything, but in every situation, by prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, present your requests to God. And the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus." This peace, described as transcending all understanding, is the peace that is available when we trust God in the midst of uncertainty. It guards our hearts from anxiety and our minds from fear, not by giving us clear answers or solutions, but by assuring us that God is with us and that He will guide us through whatever we face. But trusting God in uncertainty means acknowledging that we do not have control over every aspect of our lives. The desire for control is deeply ingrained in human nature. We want to know what's coming, how things will unfold, and what we can do to ensure that everything turns out well. But life does not always cooperate with our desire for control. Unexpected events occur, situations change, and plans fall apart. It is in these moments that we are faced with a choice. We can either allow fear to dominate us, or we can choose to trust in God, knowing that He is bigger than our circumstances. The beauty of trusting God in these moments is that He is not surprised by uncertainty. He is never caught off guard by the unknown. While we may feel lost or unsettled, God is fully aware of the path ahead. The Psalm 139:16 tells us, "Your eyes saw my unformed body. All the days ordained for me were written in your book before one of them came to be." God knows the beginning from the end, and His plans for us are set in motion long before we can see them. Trusting in God brings peace because we are relying on the one who already knows what lies ahead and who has already made provision for our journey. His guidance and protection are constant, even when we cannot yet see the next step. This peace that comes from trusting God in uncertainty also comes with the knowledge that we are not alone in our struggles. The feeling of being alone in a challenging or uncertain situation can be one of the most overwhelming aspects of life. We may feel as though we are facing the unknown without any support, and that feeling can lead to a sense of despair. But when we trust God, we realize that He is always with us. Jesus promises in Matthew 28:20, "And surely I am with you always, to the very end of the age." This assurance that God is with us, no matter what, brings a deep sense of peace. Even in the most uncertain and difficult times, we can rest knowing that God is walking with us every step of the way. He is not distant or disconnected from our struggles. He is near, offering His strength and comfort in the midst of our uncertainty. Trusting God also brings peace because it allows us to release the burden of trying to figure everything out on our own. We live in a world that often places immense pressure on us to have all the answers and to manage every aspect of our lives perfectly. This constant pressure to perform, to plan, and to anticipate every outcome can create anxiety and stress. But trusting God frees us from this burden. When we trust Him, we let go of our need to control every situation and outcome. And instead of trying to figure out every detail, we rely on God's wisdom, timing, and guidance. The pressure to know and control everything is lifted, and in its place, we find peace that comes from resting in God's ability to handle what we cannot. This peace also comes from knowing that God's plans for us are always for our good. Even when uncertainty feels overwhelming, we can trust that God's purposes are good, even when the journey is difficult. Jeremiah 29:11 offers this reassurance, "For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans for welfare and not for evil, to give you a future and a hope." This verse is a reminder that no matter how uncertain life may seem, God's plans for us are always designed to bring us to a place of flourishing. Even if we don't understand the path that leads there, trusting God in uncertainty means believing that His plans are better than our own and that He will lead us to the place we are meant to be in His perfect timing. The peace that comes from trusting God in uncertainty is also a peace that enables us to be present in the moment rather than consumed by fear of what may happen in the future. When we trust God, we can live in the here and now, knowing that He is taking care of tomorrow. Jesus teaches us this in Matthew 6:34, "Therefore do not worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will worry about itself." Each day has enough trouble of its own. Trusting God helps us to release our worry about the future and to focus on living faithfully in the present. This peace allows us to experience life more fully without the constant weight of anxiety about what might happen next. We can find joy in the moment because we trust that God has everything under control, even when we cannot see it. When we trust God in uncertainty, we also open ourselves up to the transformative power of His peace. It's a peace that doesn't just alleviate stress or quiet our minds temporarily. It changes the way we approach life. It changes our perspective, giving us a sense of calm and confidence that allows us to face challenges with a heart full of faith. This peace enables us to navigate the storms of life with the confidence that God is in control, that He is for us, and that He will never leave us. It is a peace that surpasses the understanding of the world, a peace that defies logic and circumstances, because it is rooted in the unshakable truth that God is sovereign and we can trust Him with everything. A surrendering control to God opens doors to blessings in ways that we may not immediately understand, but the act of letting go and placing our trust in God unlocks a level of peace, freedom, and joy that cannot be achieved through our own efforts alone. In a world that constantly encourages self-reliance, individual achievement, and control over every aspect of our lives, the concept of surrendering can feel like a paradox. How can giving up control bring about positive change? How can letting go lead to blessings? It is through trusting in God's sovereignty and His perfect plan for our lives that we begin to see how surrender leads to a life full of blessings that go beyond what we could ever imagine. When we hold tightly to control, we often do so out of fear, insecurity, or a desire to shape our lives according to our own desires. We want to ensure that things go the way we envision them, and we think that by managing every detail, we can guarantee a positive outcome. However, this constant need to control can lead to stress, anxiety, and disappointment. Life does not always go according to our plans, and when we encounter setbacks or difficulties, it can feel as though everything is falling apart. But when we surrender control to God, we acknowledge that He is the ultimate authority over our lives. We recognize that, although we may not understand the reasons behind circumstances, we trust that God has a purpose in everything and that His plan is ultimately for our good. A surrendering control to God means giving up our limited understanding and acknowledging His infinite wisdom. Often we try to navigate life by relying on our own knowledge, experiences, and desires. We think that we know what is best for ourselves and that we can figure things out on our own. However, God's ways are higher than ours, and His understanding far exceeds anything we could ever comprehend. When we surrender control, we allow God's greater wisdom to guide us, and in doing so, we open ourselves up to blessings that we could never achieve through our own efforts. These blessings are not necessarily material or worldly, but they are deeply spiritual and relational in nature. They bring a sense of peace and fulfillment that cannot be found in self-sufficiency. One of the greatest blessings that come from surrendering control is the peace that it brings. When we try to control every aspect of our lives, we are often filled with anxiety and stress. We worry about the future, fret over decisions, and fear the unknown. This constant state of worry drains our energy and leaves us feeling overwhelmed. However, when we surrender to God, we find a peace that transcends our understanding. This peace does not come from knowing exactly what will happen next or having everything figured out. Rather, it comes from the assurance that God is in control and we do not have to carry the weight of our worries on our own. Philippians 4:6-7 reminds us that when we present our anxieties to God in prayer, He will give us a peace that guards our hearts and minds. Surrendering control allows us to rest in that peace, knowing that God is working behind the scenes, orchestrating everything for our good. In addition to peace, surrendering control opens doors to deeper intimacy with God. When we are constantly striving to control our circumstances, we are often too focused on our own efforts to truly listen to God and seek His guidance. However, when we release control, we create space for a closer relationship with Him. Surrendering allows us to be more attuned to His voice and more willing to follow His lead. It requires humility and trust as we acknowledge that we cannot navigate life on our own. Instead, we rely on God's wisdom, strength, and direction. This deeper intimacy with God leads to blessings of guidance, comfort, and support as He leads us in ways that we could never anticipate. As we trust Him more fully, we grow in our relationship with Him, experiencing His presence in new and profound ways. A surrender also brings about greater spiritual growth. When we try to control our lives, we often become focused on our own desires and ambitions. Our vision becomes limited to what we can see and achieve on our own. However, when we surrender to God, we allow Him to stretch and transform us. We open ourselves to His refining process, which may involve challenges, discomfort, and stretching beyond our comfort zones. As we trust God through these experiences, we grow in faith, patience, and perseverance. We begin to see that true growth comes not from achieving our own goals, but from trusting God through every step of the journey. The blessings that come from this kind of growth are not always immediate or tangible, but they are lasting and eternal. Through surrender, we become more Christ-like, more compassionate, and more aware of the needs of others. Surrendering control to God also opens the door to new opportunities and blessings in our relationships. When we try to control others or manipulate situations to get our way, we often create tension, resentment, and frustration in our relationships. However, when we surrender control, we allow others the freedom to be themselves, and we let go of our unrealistic expectations. We learn to love and accept others as they are, and this creates a foundation for healthier, more genuine connections. Surrendering to God in our relationships also means trusting Him to work in the hearts of those around us. We can't change others, but God can. By surrendering control, we allow God to work in and through our relationships, bringing healing, reconciliation, and growth where it is needed. The blessings of strong, loving relationships come from allowing God to guide and strengthen them, rather than from trying to control the outcome ourselves. Another powerful blessing that comes from surrendering control is the freedom it brings. When we constantly try to control everything, we live in a state of tension and resistance. We are always striving, always pushing, and always worrying about what might happen. This creates an exhausting cycle of fear and frustration. But when we surrender to God, we are freed from the burden of having to control every detail. We can rest in the knowledge that God is sovereign and that He is working all things together for our good. This freedom allows us to experience life more fully and to enjoy the present moment without constantly worrying about what might happen in the future. We are able to trust that God will take care of our needs and that He will guide us in the direction we should go. This freedom is a gift that allows us to live with joy, gratitude, and a sense of purpose, knowing that we are not responsible for carrying the weight of the world on our shoulders. A surrendering control also allows us to experience a greater sense of purpose. When we try to control our lives, we often become focused on achieving our own goals, seeking our own success, and fulfilling our own desires. But when we surrender to God, we align ourselves with His greater purpose for our lives. We discover that our lives are not just about us, they are part of a much larger story. By surrendering our plans and desires, we make room for God to work His plan through us. This sense of purpose brings deep fulfillment because it is rooted in something eternal. We are no longer striving for fleeting accomplishments or temporary pleasures. Instead, we are working towards something that has eternal significance. The blessings that come from living in alignment with God's purpose are immeasurable. They bring joy, peace, and a sense of meaning that cannot be found in anything else. A surrendering control to God is not a one-time act, but a continual process. Every day, we must choose to release our grip on our plans and our desire for control. It is a daily surrender that opens the door to blessings, both big and small. And when we let go of our need to control everything and place our trust in God, we are invited into a life of peace, freedom, growth, and purpose. The blessings that come from surrender are not always immediate, but they are lasting, transforming us from the inside out. By trusting God with our lives, we open ourselves to a future filled with hope, joy, and fulfillment that we could never achieve through our own efforts. Celebrating small victories along the way is one of the most powerful ways to stay motivated and focused on your journey toward change. In the quest for personal transformation, we often set long-term goals that can seem overwhelming and distant. The temptation to focus solely on the final outcome can be strong, but by doing so, we risk overlooking the importance of each step we take toward our goals. Every small achievement, no matter how insignificant it may seem in the moment, is a victory in itself. When you celebrate these moments, you not only boost your motivation, but also build a foundation for sustained success. The process of resetting your life can be daunting, and there are days when progress may feel slow. It is during these moments that acknowledging small victories can be especially powerful. Every small victory, whether it's completing a task, overcoming a fear, or simply making it through a tough day, is a testament to your resilience and commitment to change. By recognizing these milestones, you reinforce the belief that progress is happening, even if it's not immediately visible or dramatic. Celebrating small victories encourages a shift in perspective. Rather than focusing on how much further you have to go, you start to appreciate how far you've already come. This mindset helps build momentum, as the acknowledgement of small wins creates a sense of accomplishment and satisfaction. It strengthens the belief that each step, no matter how minor, is moving you closer to your ultimate goal. This is crucial for maintaining focus, especially when the road ahead feels long or uncertain. Taking the time to celebrate small victories also creates a sense of pride in your own growth. It serves as a reminder of your ability to achieve and progress, even in the face of adversity. The more you celebrate the little wins, the more you begin to trust in your own capacity for success. These small victories serve as proof that change is possible and that you are capable of creating the life you desire. They reinforce the idea that transformation doesn't happen overnight but is built step by step, with each victory fueling the next. Another important aspect of celebrating small victories is the way it fosters a sense of gratitude. Life can be full of challenges, and it's easy to focus on what isn't going well or what still needs to be done. However, by taking a moment to acknowledge and celebrate even the smallest wins, you cultivate a mindset of appreciation. Gratitude for the progress you've made, however small, shifts your focus from scarcity to abundance. It helps you see the positive aspects of your journey, allowing you to approach the rest of your transformation with renewed energy and optimism. Celebrating small victories also strengthens your resilience. Life is unpredictable, and obstacles will inevitably arise along the way. However, when you regularly acknowledge your achievements, you build a sense of inner strength and determination. Even in the face of setbacks, the habit of celebrating small wins reminds you that progress is still possible. It allows you to keep going, even when the challenges seem insurmountable. The more you celebrate your victories, the more equipped you become to handle the difficulties that inevitably come with change. This practice also helps to prevent burnout. When we focus exclusively on long-term goals and neglect the small victories along the way, it's easy to feel overwhelmed and discouraged. However, by taking the time to celebrate each small step, you give yourself a moment of joy and fulfillment, which acts as a recharge. These moments of celebration are not distractions, but essential parts of the journey that help you stay motivated and avoid feeling exhausted by the process. They offer a healthy balance between hard work and rest, ensuring that you can maintain your energy throughout the entire process. Moreover, celebrating small victories fosters a positive feedback loop. As you acknowledge and appreciate each success, no matter how small, you start to feel more confident in your ability to achieve your goals. This increased confidence leads to more positive actions and decisions, further fueling your progress. It's a cycle of success where each small win encourages the next, creating an upward spiral of achievement and growth. Celebrating small victories also helps to develop a deeper sense of self-awareness. When you take the time to reflect on your progress, you become more attuned to your own strengths, weaknesses, and patterns. This self-awareness is crucial for continued growth, as it allows you to identify areas where you need to improve and areas where you're excelling. By recognizing your strengths and acknowledging the small victories that arise from them, you build a deeper connection with your true self. This understanding of your own capabilities is invaluable in the pursuit of personal transformation. Another significant benefit of celebrating small victories is the way it fosters a sense of community and support. When you share your achievements, even the small ones, with others, you invite positive reinforcement from those around you. This sense of connection and acknowledgement from others can be incredibly motivating and energizing. Whether it's a friend, family member, or colleague, having someone celebrate your wins with you can make the journey feel less solitary. It reminds you that you are not alone in your pursuit of change and that there are people who are rooting for you every step of the way. The act of celebrating small victories is also a reminder that success is not always about perfection. Often we are so focused on doing things perfectly that we overlook the importance of progress. But the truth is that perfection is not necessary for success. Consistent effort and the willingness to take small steps forward are what lead to lasting change. By celebrating small victories, you give yourself permission to embrace imperfection and acknowledge the value of every effort, no matter how small. It's a reminder that the journey itself is just as important as the destination. And lastly, celebrating small victories helps to develop a sense of joy and fulfillment in the process of transformation. It's easy to become fixated on the end result, but when you take the time to celebrate each small win, you create moments of joy along the way. These moments serve as reminders that life is not just about achieving goals, but also about enjoying the journey itself. By celebrating small victories, you create a sense of fulfillment that sustains you throughout the entire process. These moments of joy keep you grounded and remind you that even in the midst of challenges, there is always something worth celebrating.